It was a cold Manhattan morning, the kind where mist hugged the tall towers like ghosts of forgotten dreams. Inside a mansion of glass and marble, every step echoed with loneliness. That mansion belonged to Alexander Grayson, one of the richest men on Wall Street, a man whose smile never reached his eyes. He had conquered the world, but lost his heart the day his wife died in a car crash, leaving behind their only son, Ethan. The boy was 7 when the accident happened. Since then, he had stopped speaking. Doctors called it autism. Alexander called it punishment. He could buy countries, but he could not buy his child's laughter. Every morning Alexander left for his office at 6. Every night he returned to the same silence. Ethan would sit by the window, staring at lights across the city, thousands of lives out there, none that understood him. Then one afternoon, a new maid came to the house. Her name was Maya Carter, dark-skinned, soft-spoken, carrying the calm of someone who had seen pain but refused to surrender to it. She wasn't the kind of person you'd expect in a billionaire's home. Her shoes were worn out, her resume short, but her eyes, they had kindness. Mrs. Whitmore, the head housekeeper, whispered, "Mr. Grayson, this is Maya. She's here for the cleaning position." Alexander barely looked up from his laptop. "Fine. Just keep the boy's room tidy. He doesn't like anyone near him." "Yes, sir," Maya said quietly. That evening, when she entered Ethan's room, she didn't speak. She saw the boy sitting on the carpet, rocking back and forth, holding a small toy car. The moment she stepped closer, he flinched, covering his ears. Instead of talking, she slowly sat on the floor, not too close, just enough for him to see her. She took out a tiny wooden bird she kept in her pocket, rubbed it gently, and began humming a soft tune, an old African lullaby her grandmother used to sing. The sound floated through the air like sunlight slipping through clouds. Ethan's rocking slowed. He looked at her for a second, really looked, then went back to his toy. But his body was calm now. From that day, she came into his room every afternoon, always humming, sometimes drawing shapes on paper. Ethan never spoke, but he started sitting a little closer. One night, Alexander came home earlier than usual. His footsteps echoed through the hall, but he stopped when he heard something strange, a sound that hadn't lived in this house for years, laughter. He followed it to Ethan's room. Through the half-open door, he saw Maya and Ethan on the floor, building towers out of colorful blocks. Ethan was giggling softly as Maya pretended to sneeze and knock the tower over. Alexander froze. His hand gripped the doorframe. He hadn't seen his son laugh since his wife's funeral. He wanted to walk in, to say something, but words deserted him. He simply stood there, watching the maid, this stranger, reach the soul of his son with nothing but warmth. The next morning, Alexander told Mrs. Whitmore, "Keep her. Double her salary if you must." Over the next few weeks, the mansion began to change. It wasn't loud or sudden, it was in the small things. Fresh flowers appeared in the dining hall. The kitchen smelled like real food again. Ethan's drawings began filling the refrigerator door. Maya had become a quiet rhythm in their lives, sweeping floors, telling stories, and humming her songs that sounded like healing. One stormy night, thunder roared across the sky. Ethan screamed from his room. Lightning terrified him. Alexander rushed upstairs, heart pounding, calling his name. He found Maya already there, sitting on the floor beside Ethan, who was hiding under his blanket, trembling. She didn't say much, she just kept humming that same lullaby, her voice a soft heartbeat against the thunder. Alexander stood at the doorway, helpless. Slowly, Ethan peeked out and crawled into Maya's arms, pressing his face against her shoulder. The storm still raged, but inside that room there was peace. Alexander's throat tightened. Something in him cracked, a wall he had built around his own grief. Watching his son find comfort, he whispered to himself, "Why couldn't I do that?" Later that night, when the house was quiet, Alexander found Maya cleaning the hallway. He said, "You handled him better than any therapist I've ever hired." Maya looked up, surprised. "Children don't always need words, sir. Sometimes they just need to be felt." Alexander stared at her for a moment. Her voice was calm, but it carried wisdom deeper than education. "How do you do it?" he asked. She smiled faintly. My brother was like Ethan. He passed when he was 10. I learned that you can't fix them, you just walk beside them until they trust your footsteps. For a moment, Alexander had no words. He just nodded and walked away, but her words followed him all night. Days turned into weeks. Ethan's world began to open like a flower in spring. He started drawing pictures of the three of them, himself, his father, and Maya, holding hands under a big yellow sun. One afternoon, Alexander came home early again. He saw Maya teaching Ethan to bake cookies in the kitchen. Flour covered their faces, laughter echoed through the marble hall, and for a fleeting moment, Alexander felt what happiness looked like. He walked quietly to his study, sat down, and looked at the family photo on his desk, his late wife smiling, Ethan as a toddler in her arms. He whispered, "You'd have liked her, Emma, she's bringing him back." But outside that fragile peace, the world began to whisper. The staff noticed how often Alexander lingered near Maya, how his voice softened when he spoke to her. In a house built on status and power, a rumor was enough to start a storm. At first it was the staff. Little murmurs exchanged in corners, sharp glances that carried judgment. Then it spread beyond the mansion walls, into the glossy magazines and business circles. The billionaire and the maid, they called it. The gossip was cruel, dripping with the poison of class and color. Maya tried to ignore it. She told herself she was only there for Ethan, that what people said didn't matter. But each word cut deeper than the last. And one morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, she made a decision. She packed her small bag and went to Alexander's office. He was sitting behind his desk, the skyline of Manhattan glowing behind him. He looked up, and his face changed when he saw the bag in her hand. "Maya?" he asked quietly. "What's this?" "I need to go, sir," she said, her voice trembling. "People are talking. It's not good for Ethan, or for you." Alexander stood slowly, disbelief tightening his jaw. "You're leaving because of gossip?" Her eyes filled with tears. "No, sir. I'm leaving because the world doesn't understand kindness. They'll turn it into something ugly, and I can't let that hurt Ethan." He took a step forward. "Ethan needs you. I need you here." "Sir, please," she whispered. "You have power. I don't. When they talk, it destroys me, not you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, the kind that carried unsaid truths. Then, from the doorway, a small voice said, "Maya?" They both turned. Ethan stood there, clutching his toy car. His eyes were wide, confused. "You're leaving?" Maya knelt beside him, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Just for a little while, sweetheart." Ethan shook his head violently. "No! You said friends don't leave." He began crying, his small body trembling. The sound pierced Alexander's chest like a blade. He moved forward, crouched beside his son, and held him close. "Ethan, look at me," Alexander said softly. "Maya isn't leaving forever. She's just scared." Maya covered her face with her hands. "Don't do this, sir. Please." "I can't." Alexander's voice broke. "You think I care what they say? I lost my wife to an accident. I lost my son to silence. I won't lose the only person who brought him back to life." His words echoed through the room. Maya looked up, stunned. Alexander took a breath, his eyes glistening. "When I first saw you with Ethan, I thought it was a miracle. But now I know, it wasn't. It was love. Not the kind people gossip about, the kind that saves souls." Maya shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Sir, I'm just a maid." "No," he said firmly. "You're the reason my son laughs again. You're the reason I remember what it means to feel human." Ethan suddenly reached out and grabbed her hand. "Don't go, Maya. Please." Maya's resolve broke. She fell to her knees and hugged him tightly, sobbing into his hair. Alexander stood above them, his heart pounding, watching the only two people who mattered to him hold on to each other like life itself. That moment changed everything. The next morning, Alexander called a press conference. Cameras flashed as he stood before reporters. "You want a story?" he said. Here's one. A woman named Maya Carter came into my house as a maid. She didn't just clean my floors, she cleaned the dust off my heart. She taught my son how to smile again. And if any of you think love or kindness is beneath your class or color, you can keep your headlines. I'm keeping my family. The room went silent. Some were shocked, some smiled, and others lowered their cameras, realizing they just witnessed something real. Back at the mansion, Maya watched the broadcast on television. Tears filled her eyes as she saw Alexander's face, the man who once hid behind walls now standing bare before the world. Ethan ran into the room, shouting, "Maya! Daddy said you're family now." She laughed through her tears and opened her arms wide. Ethan ran into them, and she hugged him tight, whispering, "I'll never leave again, baby. Never." That evening, Alexander came home early. The air in the house felt lighter, warmer, alive. He found Maya and Ethan sitting on the floor, drawing again. This time, Ethan's picture wasn't just two stick figures. It was three, a man, a woman, and a child, all holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. At the top, in uneven letters, he'd written, "My family." Alexander looked at it for a long time. Then he knelt beside them and whispered, "It's perfect." Maya smiled softly. "He's healing." Alexander looked at her, really looked. "We all are." 6 months later. The Grayson mansion no longer felt like a museum. The halls were filled with life, music, laughter, even the smell of burnt cookies from Ethan's latest kitchen adventure. Maya was no longer the maid. She was now the director of the Grayson Foundation for Autistic Children, a dream Alexander built in her name, a dream that turned Ethan's journey into hope for others. At the grand opening ceremony, Alexander stood on stage, speaking before hundreds. "This foundation is proof that money can build walls, but love breaks them." The crowd applauded, but Alexander's eyes searched for only one person, Maya, standing in the front row beside Ethan. When the applause faded, Ethan walked up to the microphone, clutching a small piece of paper. The crowd went silent. The boy who once couldn't speak now faced the world. "Thank you, Daddy, and thank you, Maya," he said in a soft voice, "for finding me." Tears rolled down Maya's face. Alexander's eyes glistened. The hall erupted into applause. That night, as the three of them stood on the balcony, watching the city lights below, Alexander said quietly, "You know, Maya, I used to think being a billionaire made me powerful. But the truth is, I was just empty." She looked at him, her expression soft. "And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I'm rich in the only way that matters." Ethan yawned and leaned against Maya's arm. She lifted him gently and carried him inside. Alexander followed, turning off the balcony lights behind him. The mansion, once cold and silent, now pulsed with warmth. Epilogue: The Heart That Healed. Years later, Ethan grew into a confident young boy who loved painting and helping other kids like him. The Grayson Foundation became a beacon of hope for families across the world. People often asked Alexander how he managed to turn tragedy into light. He always gave the same answer. "Because once, a maid sang to my son when I couldn't. And in her song, I found my heart again." Outro, for YouTube narration. Sparkles, if this story touched your heart, remember, love has no class, no color, no price tag. Sparkling heart, it only needs courage. Clapperboard, subscribe now and share this story, because somewhere out there, a small act of kindness can still change a life.